Hi everyone! In this video lesson, we will be looking at pesticides as well as bioaccumulation. What is a pest? A pest is any unwanted organism that attacks food, crops, or livestock. And a pesticide is a substance used to kill that pest. Why are pesticides used? Well, the pests can destroy crops, and this can cost farmers money because they don't have any produce to sell. It's estimated that 30% of crops in Canada is lost to pests, and they can also carry diseases. So, for example, mosquitoes can carry a disease called malaria. There are a few different types of pesticides. First, we have insecticides, and these are used to kill insects or rodents, for example, DDT. There's herbicides, which are used to kill weeds or plants, for example, Roundup. There's fungicides, used to kill molds or fungi, for example, Captan. And finally, there's bactericides, used to kill bacteria, so for example, penicillin. Pesticides can vary in how long they persist or remain in the environment. Some pesticides break down faster than others, but some can remain in our food source. In this little cartoon, you can see at this market, it says organic, which means there are no pesticides used in growing this food. So this guy is saying, sure, it costs more. We have to squash bugs by hand. So obviously he doesn't mean he's killing every bug by hand. However, because it takes more work to uphold the produce because they can't just spray it with a pesticide, it typically costs more to purchase. And that's why organic foods tend to be more expensive. Let's look at broad spectrum versus narrow spectrum pesticides. So your broad spectrum pesticides are effective against many different types of pests and will kill any pest present. For example, DDT that was mentioned before. This is a very potent pesticide that can kill a lot of different organisms. Whereas a narrow spectrum pesticide is effective against a few types of pests. So these are designed to target specific organisms. As mentioned before, there are problems with pesticides. They can contaminate lakes and rivers by rainfall or melting snow. So think a pesticide is sprayed on a crop and then it rains, and this water then it flows downland into a stream and can end up in a river or a lake. Another problem is that they can kill other desirable species, so they can affect species that we don't want to die. Only 90% of pests are killed, thus pests can mutate and develop resistance to the pesticide. As you can see in this image, before pesticide application we have this population of bugs, and afterwards it gets most of them. But there's this one red guy here who is a mutant and is resistant to the pesticide. When these bugs reproduce, they will produce more of these resistant bugs, these red ones, and they will be able to survive the pesticides and they won't be able to be eliminated. And developing resistance means newer, more costly pesticides must be used. Next, we will be looking at two important concepts known as bioaccumulation and bioamplification. They are different. So, bioaccumulation is an increase in the concentration levels of a pesticide within the body of an organism over time. So, as you can see, these fish start off with no contaminants in their system, but over time, the contamination grows as it accumulates in their system, and soon they're heavily contaminated. Bioamplification or biomagnification, they're the same thing, affects a species at higher trophic levels because they are feeding on more than one organism below it, and then these pesticide concentrations tend to increase. So as you can see, It starts at a really low level in this first species. Then, as the fish eat these, the contaminant levels increase. See how we're changing species as it goes up. So this seal will eat the fish, it increases even more, and finally this polar bear eats the seal, and we have a very high level of contamination. It is very easy to get these two terms confused, so make sure you understand the difference between bioaccumulation and bioamplification or biomagnification. Bioaccumulation in one species and bioamplification or magnification as a species eats another species. There are much safer ways to control pests than using pesticides. So for example, biological control, we've seen this before. You can use predatory insects or insects that will eat the pests that you don't want there. You could also use a disease-causing microorganisms that targets this pest and the pest specifically. You can insert a bacterial gene into crops that produces a protein that is toxic to the pest. So if the pest tries to eat the crops, they will die and your crops will not be harmed. Next, you have crop rotation. So pests may not like new crops. If you had corn planted before, they might have really liked that. But if you plant strawberries next, they may not be as big of a fan. Or you can attract new predators. So by planting a new crop, you can attract something else that will target the pest that you don't want. You should also remove sick plants that are susceptible to the pests so you don't attract any more. And by rotating crops, pests can't establish a permanent habitat because it's constantly changing. You should also adjust planting so no food is available when the pest is born. So if you wait to plant, a pest is born, it will realize it has no food available and will leave your area, so then you can plant your crops. Next is integrated pest management, and this combines natural controls and cultural practices with a limited use of pesticides. By using multiple methods or some of these concepts in this image, you can find the most effective way to control these pests. And that concludes this video lesson.